Right then. Okay, everyone. Well, hello. Welcome to the second Digital Cafe of the spring 2025 term. I'm glad you've been able to join us today. I'm your host, William Letzu. I'm assistant professor in the Biological and Chemical Science Department at New York Tech. And on behalf of Dean Moore of the College of Arts and Sciences, I'd like to thank all of New York Tech's staff, faculty, students, alumni, and guests who are here tuning into today's event. I'd like to remind everyone that today's talk is being recorded. We'll take questions following the presentation, but you should feel free to enter the questions or comments into the chat at any time. And stay tuned for our new Dean's Digital Cafe webpage on the New York Tech website, where you can watch recordings of today's and previous events. And before introducing our speaker, Dr. DiMartino, I'd like to acknowledge the land. The Long Island campus of New York Tech sits on a larger territory known as Pominoke, which was home to numerous indigenous communities, including the local tribes of the Mattincocks and the Merricks. I'd like to acknowledge the land, the stewardship and sovereignty of the native peoples and their enduring importance, even in this virtual environment, to our working community here today. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Melissa DiMartino, previously Huey, joined New York Tech in 2018 as an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology and Counseling, and was just this fall made an associate professor. Dr. DiMartino received an MA from the City College of New York and a PhD from the Florida Atlantic University. Her research at New York Tech focuses on the psychological well-being of adolescents and young adults in the classroom and has been featured in media and outlets such as the Washington Post and Psychology Today. She currently runs a social developmental psychology lab on the New York campus, and today is going to be telling us about her work on exercise interventions in middle school students. So welcome, Melissa. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, William, for the introduction. I'm actually going to screen share, which I probably should have asked you ahead of time. Share a little presentation. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of exercise, which everybody sort of knows, but no one seems to get enough exercise these days with the way our society's formatted.
Got plenty of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint? Just want to check. Hey, Fanita, thanks for joining us. Give better presentations. Oh, that's always a good thing. Okay, so I did a study. It was actually a collaboration. Can everybody see it before I start talking?
Yep, you're in presentation mode. Looks good.
Awesome. So thank you very much. I did a study actually in collaboration with the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences Department on the Old Westbury campus. What we wanted to do was look at how an exercise intervention could impact middle school students and their psychological well-being. So it was kind of a conjunction of exercise from an exercise scientist and also psychological well-being. My research focuses on the impact of psychological well-being of students in the classroom, so it kind of fit together very nicely. I also have a senior research assistant, Yana Kostova. She's actually about to graduate. She's not here, so I can embarrass her, and got into a PhD program recently at CUNY, so very exciting for her, and she was kind of the person that was on the ground with me running the project. Just to start off, everyone knows, but I don't know how much everybody sees this, but obesity has now officially been considered an epidemic in the United States. It's one of the most pressing healthcare issues that we have. We see the rates, like when you look at the entire United States, as 1 in 3 people are overweight, and actually 1 in 5 people on average are obese, classified as a BMI of 30 or greater. So this was an interesting map that I feel like just outlines this from the CDC. And I wanted to note that I thought that Colorado was doing great. I just went to Colorado for a conference. It's just like funny that there's like one glaring great state. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe the clean air. It's very elevated over there. So whatever it is, they're doing great. We should all try to be like them. But
just raise the elevation of all the other states, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Like, yeah, exactly. Like maybe they have to walk up more mountains. I don't know. The clean air goes to their head. They get a lot of exercise. I just thought it was funny that our sad, obesity chart, and then we have Colorado right there. Anyways, so as you can see, just looking at the CDC report, this is, I believe, from 2018, is that obviously this is a big issue and a pressing issue that if you look at it, I didn't want to inundate you all with charts, but if you look at it over the years, has gotten progressively worse, pretty significantly. And so my interest as a developmental psychologist is is interest in children. And obviously, if we have a public health, what a lot of people and professionals have coined a crisis of the obesity epidemic, it starts with children. Sadly enough, it looks like almost a quarter of children, only a quarter of children get the recommended exercise and physical activity that they're supposed to get every day. 1 in 4 children are overweight. And I know how much everybody knows about children. Some, if you have them, you know a lot about them, but it's really kind of a red flag for developmental psychologists when children are overweight. Naturally, they should be working on their instincts to sort of like eat when they're hungry. Like they're still working on an intrinsic physiological response system that when they're hungry, they eat, and when they stop, when they're full. This overeating habit really shouldn't have been formed in young children. And on top of that, we see a situation where they shouldn't be overeating and they should be getting a ton of physical activity. So one of the issues that we're trying to address, and the easiest way for children to combat unhealthy eating, is through physical activity. There's a lot of reasons, and we're welcome to open up a dialogue about that, but a lot of reasons why children don't get enough physical activity. But physical activity is the easiest way to combat unhealthy eating. I'm sure everybody's had a mother that said, oh, they could eat. My mother-in-law says that about my kids now. They're like, oh, they could eat whatever they want because they're always running around. So one of the issues that we see, especially as we enter middle school, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is children are not getting enough physical activity. So diet doesn't necessarily come as such a concern at a young age, because if you know kids, they're always running around. And so kids aren't getting enough time to get that activity anymore. And because of that, now they're facing the obesity epidemic is now trickling down into youngsters as well. So interestingly enough, our state requirement, New York State, only requires 2 hours of physical activity a week in what we average on a low average of a 32-hour school week. And that's a low average. That's averaging about 6 to 6.5 hours a day, whereas most school days are actually longer than that. So we're looking at about 6% of their entire school day goes to any sort of movement. And that is honestly overwhelming and crazy, because we know, we'll talk in a little bit about obviously all the negative effects of not getting enough physical activity, obesity basically as a proxy for all these other illnesses that the United States healthcare system is facing right now, like diabetes, heart disease, etc. But they're only required by law to give them 120 minutes of physical activity a day. Now, within that physical activity class that they're required to have, some sort of physical activity within the school day, what we see is that specifically middle schoolers, which is the population we're going to talk about, are not doing anything in physical education. So we have like a compounded issue. We have an obesity epidemic. 1 in 3 people are overweight, which is just crazy when you compare it to other countries. Then you have how many people are obese, which is almost 20%, even more than 20% of the population in a lot of states. Then you have youngsters who aren't getting enough physical activity. The state is not requiring them to get enough physical activity. And then to compound the issue, when they're getting enough physical activity, when they're getting the opportunity to have physical activity, they're not actually engaging in physical activity that matters. So if Amerigo was here, he would tell you more about the heart rate, but basically what we want, and everybody sort of knows this without knowing it, is we want heart rate elevated. We want moderate to vigorous physical activity. Like we want the kids to be moving. We want adults to be moving. Anybody that's exercising, you know that the main thing to look at some of these conditions that we're really ailed with in the United States, like diabetes and heart disease, is we need to be in a cardiovascular sweat, more or less. You need to be sweating. You need to be getting your heart rate up. I don't know if sweat's an official classification, but your heart rate definitely needs to be elevated. So even when these kids are exercising, the middle schoolers in particular aren't actually doing anything. And I mean, I'm sure you remember being in middle school, like not wanting to do gym, you're trying to like stand in the corner. And I'll tell you more about the intervention, but the days that I was there for the intervention, it was funny. Like the kids that were in the moderate to vigorous activity condition, which I'll talk about in a minute, were getting like worked, and they were trying to hide from one of them was like in the corner trying to like scurry away, because nobody actually wants to do moderate physical activity because it's hard for them. They're not used to it, etc. So as we know, I shouldn't say as we know, from a psychological standpoint, we know, I'm sorry, as we know, the physical effects of obesity and not enough physical activity are really clear, right? We have where you're overweight, you have heart disease, you're more likely to have a heart attack, you're more likely to be diabetic type 2, et cetera. But there's also an overwhelming amount of research that supports that physical activity is associated with psychological well-being as well. Lower depressive symptoms, lower anxiety, better self-esteem in the way I'm saying it, or low self-esteem if you're not getting physical activity, lower cognitive functioning, which we're going to talk more about, more mood swings. It's just a host of outcomes. And the research is overwhelming, right? We know that for your psychological and physical well-being, kids, adults, everyone, is elders are better off with exercise. The problem is that in our country right now, we're not getting it. We're not prioritizing it. And you can see that the prioritization is not there because 120 minutes of physical activity is only required, which is more often than not, less than 6% of the student's entire day. So you're just assuming that every hour that they're at school, they're going to be sitting down in a classroom doing nothing. And actually, the school that I did the research at has no recess most days because they do. So this is the school that we did the research at. It's actually my niece's middle school, and it's a private school. They agreed to do the study. The principal was it's a Trinity Lutheran. It's in Hicksville, New York. It's a small school. There's only 40 students in the middle school, but the principal was kind enough to do an entire middle school intervention. We got IRB approval after a lot. It's hard to work with kids and exercise. It was a long IRB process, but we got IRB approval, and the principal actually agreed to basically cancel first period. So originally we were trying to do it as the students would come up early. And then we said, well, some parents aren't going to be able to bring their kids to school early. This is going to become a mess. So the principal agreed to remove first period for the time that they were doing the exercise. So all of the kids that participated in the study, instead of going to first period, did these exercise conditions that I'll talk about. And if they didn't want to participate in the study, which ended up only being 1 or 2 kids, then they just had like a study hall where they got to read or relax. So this was a really great intervention. Sorry, I want to jump ahead. It's just great that the school offered to do this. They were very accommodating. It's really nice. It's hard to get schools from a developmental psychology standpoint. It's very hard to get in schools. There's a lot of like ropes you have to jump through, and this ended up working out really nice. Sort of as a preliminary study. Dr. Rossi and I plan on doing this in the future. So just to reiterate what the kids were doing, kind of like what I talked about when I said, well, even when they're getting their 120 minutes of physical activity, they're not actually doing physical activity that matters. This is a survey that we took straight from the kids about what they do during recess, which is basically nothing for the most part. I mean, 3 of the 40 kids, I'm not sure if this came out to 40, maybe somebody was missing, but 3 of the 40 kids ran around and played most of the time. 4 played of 40 kids. So we're looking at 10% ran around and played, but the majority of the kids stood around, sat down, walked around, really weren't doing anything. So this kind of substantiates the fact that kids are not getting enough physical activity, because even recess, which at this school is only offered 2 or 3 times a week for 20 minutes. So that's the only time that they get to run around. They're actually just kind of standing around talking. Again, they're 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. What do 6th, 7th, and 8th graders want to do? They want to talk. They want to, chatter, gossip, read, whatever, but they're not actually getting any activity during recess. So like I said, even when you have the opportunity, that's what's really interesting, is that we're really ingraining a lack of physical fitness in our society, because like I said back here, even when they have the chance to be in PE class, they're not doing moderate to vigorous activity that would have the good effects on their health. So what we did was we designed an exercise intervention program. So we had basically 2 different conditions. Amerigo and I, Dr. Rossi and I, are still in debate about, I think the stretch condition is considered exercise because I'm not an exercise person. To me, stretching feels good, but he says that was, like more of a control condition, that he didn't think it was going to have any effects. But we basically had an exercise group. We split, so all the middle schoolers, there's actually kind of a perfect design in terms of the way it worked out. We had 40 students agree. We had 20 students in group A, 20 students in group B. We randomly assigned them to each group. We were very clear that it needed to be very random. The grades and everything were mixed together. So for the first period, every day. Instead of having first period, which like I said was amazing of the principal, they participated in an exercise condition. 20 students did moderate to vigorous exercise. The other 20 students did stretching. And then they had a washout period, sort of a washout that we also treated as a control where they weren't doing any exercise. And then we flipped the conditions. 20 students did stretching, 20 students did exercise. And so, they had both of the conditions in a counterbalanced trial, and it was randomized. So the students were randomly assigned to groups. This worked out really well. Actually, one of the weeks of the washout, they weren't even in school, but we didn't collect any data during that time because obviously if they're not in school, we can't be, collecting the data. In the exercise condition, it was very thought out because the exercise condition was where we were really looking for the effects. When I say exercise condition, we were looking at moderate to vigorous activity. So we wanted the kids' heart rates to be elevated. So they were doing burpees, they were doing sprints. And like I said, it's interesting to see because when I went in there, I wasn't there every day of the thing. They had their gym teacher do the exercise condition and we had someone else come in to do the stretching. The kids did not want to be exercising. They were hiding in the corner. They were like, oh, I'm taking a break. They weren't used to having their heart rate elevated like that. So they were very winded. And then the stretch condition was more low key. It was just kind of we didn't want their heart rates raised. We wanted to see the differential heart rate, which we tracked with Fitbits, which I'll talk about in a second. And so it was stretching, hamstring stretches, lower body stretches, more yoga type things. Again, Dr. Rossi kept saying, oh, the stretch condition is not going to have any effects. And I kept going, hey, they're stretching instead of being in class. I feel like that can't be a bad thing. In terms of the measures, we gave all the kids Fitbits, and that measured their heart rate to make sure that their heart rate was actually elevated during the exercise condition. It also measured sleep, but we didn't really get reliable data, honestly, in sleep because the kids had to keep them on overnight, which you could ask kids to do it, but there was too much missingness to really kind of have a reliable measure on that when there was only 40 kids. And again, like we said, we'd like to continue this. This is kind of a preliminary study. And then we took measures of psychological well-being. So the kids were supposed to wear their Fitbit for the duration of the study, which lasted 6 weeks, if you include the control and the washout period. And then at the end of every school day, and this might have been if we redo the study, we might change it a little bit, but we measured psychological well-being. So we measured anxiety, depression, attentional control, which is more about shifting focus and being able to pay attention, as it sounds. And psychological well-being on 2 scales. There's umbrella scales that measure psychological well-being. So that was sort of the measures. We also gave them a general activities questionnaire in the beginning of this, in the beginning of the survey to see how much activity they were doing in general. And like I said, the Fitbits were really the trackers to make sure their heart rates were elevated in the exercise condition, because the exercise condition is supposed to be sort of moderate to vigorous activity. So basically, obviously, as you would expect, we thought that there would be a significant increase in psychological well-being when they participated in the exercise. I was also sort of had a semi-hypothesis that the stretch condition might have positive effects. And so that was sort of our, what we were expecting to find. So this is just interesting, just to say, so this is the physical activity questionnaire that we gave them in the beginning. This is not part of the study design, so I didn't want to deceive you of significant results that weren't there. These are correlations. So basically, what it shows is the students that were exercising more had significantly higher correlations on the initial scale of happiness, self-esteem, attentional control, and psychological well-being. So this is really interesting because it shows that right off the bat, even if we had not done an intervention or anything that allowed the kids to exercise more, already the kids that were getting more physical activity that scored higher on that physical activity questionnaire had higher levels of well-being overall. So I thought that was interesting because it shows that, we didn't need to do the study before they did anything. The kids that were, no, the point of the study was to get them to exercise, but the kids that were doing more exercise off the bat had higher, were feeling better about themselves. So our big finding was kind of the difference in attentional control, which was interesting. I hypothesized that it would be more focused on the psychological, the measures that were more psychological well-being. Oh, and let me just take a step back. Every day at the end of school, the kids took one of the 5 psychological well-being attentional control measures. So on Monday after the survey, they would take self-esteem. On Tuesday, they would take the anxiety measure. So it was very quick. I think a miss on our part is we had them take it at the end of the day. And they were just like, I was there a lot of it for a lot of the time, and like they were just like ready to go. So we didn't find as much significance in the psychological well-being measures as I would have expected. But I honestly, I'm not just saying this because I'm biased. I honestly think it was like bad. Like it was just maybe not the best time. Like maybe we should have done it before they went to lunch or something like that. But we found overwhelmingly significant effects in attentional control and attentional shifting. So attentional control is essentially like the child's, the youngster's ability to pay attention and to regulate, their focus in class, which is really important, correlated with academic success. And so we actually found a difference between the control group when they weren't exercising and the exercise and stretching conditions that was significant. So basically, the people who did moderate to vigorous exercise or the people who stretched had significantly higher levels of attentional control than when they were doing their normal school day. And there could, I'll talk about the other finding too, and then we could always talk about it afterwards. There could be several reasons for that. But as you would expect, first of all, you have the situation of, you have the dopamine release of getting the exercise. You also had less time that you were sitting in the classroom having to focus. So that could be one of the effects. And so it's important though, because it's really highly correlated with academic success. The same thing we look at with attentional shifting. So attentional shifting is interesting. Actually looking at this, I feel like I need to work on this because sometimes I'm like working and then I get home with my kids and I need to move into like 3 and 5-year-old realm of parenting, and it's like a very jarring shift for me. So after I found these results, I was like looking up attentional shifting, how to do it better. I was like, oh, I should start exercising in the beginning of my day. I'd have better attentional shifting. But basically between groups, when we looked between the exercise and stretch condition, we found significant results in attentional shifting. So the exercise did have a significant, the moderate to vigorous exercise had a significant effect here, where students were better at attentional shifting when they had that exercise. So it helped their ability to focus and their ability to shift from this task to this task, which in middle school is particularly important because by middle school now, shocking to me, apparently I'm old, they're in 8 different subjects with different teachers for the most part. So, and they're only 45 minutes. So they need to shift. I mean, this was this school, but a lot of schools follow this platform. So they really do need to be able to shift their focus from thing to thing. So again, this really sort of highlights their academic performance and academic success, which was interesting. We did not find, like I said, we found mean level differences, but they weren't significant in the psychological well-being categories. But like I said, I think that might have been because of when we collected the data, they were kind of really ready to go. And they were kind of like packing up, and the teacher was like, come on, don't forget your survey. And it was very like, I saw it happen. It was very like, ooh, 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 like just trying to see it. So I don't know, maybe Freud would say I'm rationalizing, but I would say that maybe that's true. So most importantly, and again, there's no pictures of the kids because we're not allowed, we're not allowed to take pictures of the kids. That would have been a whole nother IRB platform. But most importantly, they had a higher heart rate. So we already know, the research already exists, that they're exercising more, that the exercise is better for them. Elevating their heart rate is better for them. That's where the talk sort of started. And we elevated their heart rate. So they were getting, when they were exercising in first period, their heart rates were elevated. There were significantly higher heart rates than when they were at their baseline and in the stretching condition. So all of those effects that we already know that we have in the literature had an effect, because they were elevated. If not anytime again, they were elevating their heart rate. And honestly, just anecdotally, my niece was in the study because it was her school and she participated in the study. And she told me afterwards, she's like, I actually felt better afterwards. Like, she's like, during the day, I felt better when in the exercise condition, even though she didn't like it. She's like, she said to me verbatim, like, I liked the exercise condition better, but I felt like I liked the stretching condition better, but I felt better after the exercise condition. So I thought that was interesting. So like the results I think are informative to say that like we need to make an effort to get kids moving more. A great place to do that would be to start to look at some governmental policies to implement longer PE time. I mean, it was overwhelming, the idea that these kids weren't even, like, to me, I just assumed they got like 30 minutes for recess. When I first went into the school and found out that most days they're not even doing recess, like they're not even having recess. So there's not even a chance that these kids are going to be working out, is crazy. Kids need time to run around. They need time to, exercise and get that physical activity. And that's arguably the number one most important thing to combat obesity in children. Children shouldn't have to be on a diet thinking about what they eat. I mean, obviously teaching as a parent healthy habits for children on how to eat healthy and, how to make good choices is always important, but they shouldn't be having to think over too much about what they're eating because they should be running around like crazy because they're children. And I think that a lot of the issue is that we've taken a lot of that away because of the emphasis of schoolwork and academics. So we need more interventions to sort of, start to buffer these effects and look at the physical and mental health of children as the most important thing that could be happening for them over and above academic achievement, and start to allow them these opportunities to get enough exercise. Thank you. These are my two brothers having a push-up contest on the beach at the Jersey Shore. I can't post any pictures of the kids, but my two brothers both love themselves. So I thought they'd appreciate that I shared this picture. I didn't even ask, honestly, because I just know they love themselves. So there they are. That's what these middle schoolers should have been doing. Push-up contest every day, but no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, thanks. Happy to take any questions or anything.
All right, thanks, Melissa. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, I have a question. So
Yeah.
the ones that were like, the most active, what were they doing outside of school? Were they in sports? Did they, what did they do?
Yes, that's a question, Chuck. They were in sports. It seems like sports is most of the people, most of the students, excuse me, who got the higher ratings on those initial questionnaire were doing like structured sports. So structured sports really helps because it's just another way to force that. And I guess that's also something to mention, like also just enroll, like if you're not going to let your kids just like, maybe they're not at the age, middle schoolers, or it's just not their proclivity, the way society's formatted with social media, phones, everything to run around, recreating that structure outside of school, like tremendously helps them. All the kids that were doing the higher levels were in sports. Great question.
Yeah, just also a question about the organized sports. Like, is that like I mean, maybe this is a good like policy research thing, but how many schools are actually, having sports, and maybe thinking of like making sports as like part of the curriculum? Like, because recess was kind of it was just a downtime, and
Yeah.
but sports is the enforced physical activity. Is that like, could that be part of the school day in some sense? Like, a sport is required, or something? Has any
Yeah, I mean,
debate
that's
on
funny
that
because
exist, or?
part of the reason the kids actually miss recess is for music, which I also think music is very important, but I just found it interesting. I was like, they don't have like, I was just blown away. And again, this is small school. I don't know how every school works, but I think that would be good. Or just having, I know PE now from getting involved with the schools, like has different like units they go through. So maybe having PE every day, and then having different units where they play sports. I think it's hard. It would be hard to like require the sports, and when you get involved in sports and you end up with the games and the stuff, like there's more demand on the parents. The problem is it's up to the parents a lot, like do they want to take their kids? But having something in the school where you have PE every day and you go through different units of sports could be a good solution. To just having PE every day honestly would be a good solution. But
I mean, I wonder, like, it just like during the day, like you're not like in like PE mode, but like if it's like after school thing, like to suddenly, if this is like, you're not worried about getting dirty for the next class or not, I don't, you're sweaty or something. Maybe those kind of concerns are, part
yeah.
of maybe not at that age, or maybe they're starting to think of it at that age, but like, maybe like if it's an after, I mean, I'm not trying to, I don't know, I can't convince, I'm not trying to convince you, right? You're not in charge of the
Yeah. No, no,
the
no. Yeah.
policy, but
No, it's a great, I mean, it's
yeah.
a great idea. Basically, any additional exercise these kids could get would be like the best possible scenario, like,
Mhm.
and even with niece, like they were so worried, the school was so worried about them, the teachers, I should say, the principal was actually fine with it. The school was worried about them missing the curriculum.
Mhm.
But I was like, it's a 7-hour day, and now they're going to exercise for 35 minutes. Like she's there from 8 to 3. So yeah, it's a 7-hour day. So I said, it's a long day. Like, I don't know. I feel like there should be some emphasis just on the physical activity aspect of it, because obviously kids aren't getting it. Yeah, Fanita.
Yeah. Um, do you know how many sports that they do after school at that school? Because sometimes the schools, right, will have like a basketball team, a soccer team, cheerleading.
Yeah. Yeah, they
track.
have some after school sports, but it's a small school, so it's limited, but they do have like volleyball after school in the fall, and then they have, I think, one thing in the spring. It's not as many as bigger schools, but they do have things for the kids to participate in.
Mhm.
And kids do. And sort of to, to Chuck's point, like the kids that are getting enough physical activity are generally engaged in that structure. And I think that's probably a combination of the way our society is formatted now, and also just being in middle school. I don't want to say one or the other. I mean, some, middle schoolers want to talk and gossip and chat, but also, obviously you can't, the big miss is, the kids are on their phones. They're not like playing outside together the way they used to be. Like I feel so old all of a sudden. I don't know. One day I guess but when I was a kid, like even through middle school, like we used to have this group of kids and we'd all go outside until it was like time for us to go in and do our homework or whatever. That's not really happening anymore. So I would say it's that, but it's also middle schoolers. I mean, even when they're together on the playground, what are they choosing to do? They're choosing to chat. So, but they do have some sports, yes. So that's good.
Great.
What kind of what was the assessment are you talking about? They just did it at the end. It was like what exactly did they have to do to measure like attentional focus or shifting, or what, like was it just
That's a
how
great
did you
question,
feel? Yeah.
William, and I shouldn't have said that. It was
That's
a
right.
simple self-report survey. So it was just like, it had usually somewhere between like, I think the shortest one was 7 to 15 items. And it just said
Mhm.
like, I paid attention in class. I can't remember them all verbatim, but
Mhm.
things like that. For self-esteem, it was like, I feel like I'm of value. I feel like I have good self-worth, things like that. So it was very quick.
Okay.
But like I said, I think the miss was like, because I was there some of the days, and we didn't want to interrupt the school day much more. Like they had already canceled first
Mhm.
period for
Mhm.
us. So like we were like, oh, let's just do it at the very end of the day, because they have 5 minutes basically. But what I found out after the whole thing is like they had like 5 to 10 minutes to get back to their homeroom, get their stuff, pack up, and now they were supposed to take the survey.
Yeah.
So I think in hindsight, it would have been better, maybe like lunch, it's hindsight's always 2020, but it would have been better in lunchtime or something, because they were trying to get out of it. It's the end of their day. They're ready to go. They've been in school for 7 hours. They
Yeah,
weren't like, let me sit down and think thoughtfully about these questions that they're asking me over and over. That was the other thing. Every week that they were in school, that they had the exercise so that we could like maximize the data, because we were like, we're already doing it. We asked them a question. It was like by like the 5th week, they were like burnout. The amount of missingness by the second condition, like once they had the break and came back, was like it wasn't reliable. So some of that was a little bit of a miss, but you learn. So
yeah, very good.
well, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? No, it sounds like a really neat study. I mean, it's, as you said, it's just getting it to go even at all is a huge challenge with all
Yes,
the.
when the principal
Well,
agreed, I was
yes.
shocked. Honestly, I was like, really? You're gonna do this with me? All right. So
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Well, I guess that's it for today. So thank you, Melissa. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to join us again next week when Professor Henry Ruiz from the Department of Biological and Chemical Sciences will be telling us on a related topic about a mouse model of obesity. So hope to see you there. And so take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
thanks, William.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
so
you,
much,
Melissa.
Melissa.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.